JayEmm on Cars is sponsored by Car Vertical. With just a registration number, or even better, a VIN, Car Vertical will search over 20 European databases to find out whether any car you're looking at has a hidden past. They can see if a vehicle was used as a taxi, stolen, suffered fire damage, or involved in a crash, even when it wasn't written off, so could pass other checks. Car Vertical is now an essential tool in my car buying kit, putting all the information I need to know together in one easy-to-read report. Even better, if you follow the link in the description down below, you'll get 10% off. A big thank you to them for being today's sponsor.
Hello everybody. Today I have been driving several Lotus products, and now I'm jumping in something that weighs about a ton more than the last one, a Jaguar F-Type R. In the last 6 months or so, car prices across the board have absolutely skyrocketed to the point where nearly everything seems to be about £5,000 to £10,000 more than it once was. This is down to a combination of factors. A lot of people seem to have quite a bit of money at the moment. Car dealers are struggling for new supply because of many different shortages, and I think demand in general is increasing because it would appear that in the next few years we really are going to see the end of internal combustion engine sales, at least here in the UK. Hard to believe, I know, but the Jaguar F-Type is rapidly approaching its 10th birthday, having debuted in 2013 in convertible form, then in 2014 as a coupe. I've driven several of them. Initially I was quite cold about the whole thing, but as time has progressed I have warmed to the car's many charms and found it's actually quite an interesting proposition, certainly when compared to a 911. It is not exactly a scalpel, and that is very clear on this particular road where it is lumping and bumping and rather struggling just a bit with this tarmac that's not very good. The Series 1 Elise that I just took out floated down the road like a limousine by comparison. This also feels absolutely gargantuan and rather out of place, and I have to say the exhaust on this earlier car is rather obnoxious. This is a 2016, and I was particularly keen to try it because all of the other F-Types I've driven lately have been fairly recent ones. In 2018 they updated the car, brought in a new infotainment, but also the dreaded and much maligned petrol particulate filter. That meant the cars got a little bit quieter. However, if you've driven a recent Jaguar product, you'd be hard pressed to know because they're still rather vocal, the little so-and-sos. That exhaust noise is actually rather irksome. The amount of cracks and bumps out of this thing is far too much. One of the reasons I think I failed to warm to the car initially was because I had a Lotus Evora 400, and if you wanted a nice, very quick down a B road British sports car, that is certainly a much better thing. It was also more practical than the F-Type convertible. I think it was a little bit more exotic, and to me, just a little bit more special all round. However, Evoras have remained fairly strong price-wise. You're still looking at well over £50,000 to get you into a 400, but about 35 grand could get you into an early F-Type R. Those are the ones with about 550 horsepower. This car is a 2016 all-wheel drive, so some of the early ones were two-wheel drive. This has 550 horsepower, about 500 pound-feet of torque. So it's not exactly slow, despite a curb weight that was always far heavier than it should have been for a car made out of aluminium. The reason for this excess curb weight, I believe, is because the F-Type is based on essentially a shortened version of the old XK. I was, for a long time, always much more fond of those cars. I think the lines have aged very well, and they're rather pleasant to drive. However, they never had the sporty dynamic ability of the F-Type. The gearbox in those was always a bit of a letdown. They kept the old 6-speed, whereas these always got the newer 8-speed, and of course the infotainment and everything was just a little bit older too. As it happens, the infotainment in here is okay. It doesn't feel horrendously out of date. It's not as good as the later one. It doesn't have Apple CarPlay, Android Auto or anything like that, but it does the trick. It's nice enough and it doesn't feel horrifically old. This car is also nicely specified. I rather like the grey. It's actually quite classy, and it's got a sunroof too, which is something I always like to see. See, with the exhaust in normal mode, if you put your foot down, it will open the valves anyway. And there's one thing this car's not short of. That's pace. It's ruddy quick. All-wheel drive too means that you can deploy that power nearly all the time. And that's one of the reasons this car's owner, Ethan, chose the all-wheel drive. Response low down is not necessarily what you expect it might be from a 5-litre supercharged engine, but get us spinning At about 4,000 RPM, not only does she sing, she will drag you to that horizon. I think that was air back there, or close to it. Body control, not an F-Type speciality, but grip, rather good. Do feel like I'm beasting this road though. It's not a ballet dancer this, more of an elephant in a leather jacket, but it does get the job done. I couldn't believe either Ethan was only 21. He's been working fairly hard to buy this car and was originally going to get a C63, but then found out about these and decided this was the much more special car. Ethan, you made the right choice. Really like the seats in this too, and actually the cream and black in here does lift the interior so it feels just a little bit less monotone. Make a bit of noise, shall we? It's just the cracks and pops on the overrun that really bugged me, honestly. I am the sort of person that will be out there and tell you never, ever to buy a car for investment, particularly as we are in what are certainly some very, very strange times. I don't think anyone really knows quite what is going on. And that's not just with the car market. The fact is that Jaguar do have a long history of making their models go for quite some time. This wasn't a very unusual thing just a couple of decades ago, but now it is. However, the most recent facelift to the F-Type was actually a pretty minor one. I think many of us expected a little bit more. But the truth is, what's under here is inherently right. There are a few flaws with the car. The convertible has next to no boot space at all, but at least the coupe doesn't pretend to have little back seats that are entirely useless like the XK. It also is a heck of a lot of fun. It's a more special thing than the 911 as far as I'm concerned, and I don't think there's any chance of Jaguar actually making another petrol-powered F-Type anytime soon. And when you boil it down, although the F-Type is not a perfect thing, it delivers fun, it delivers thrills, an absolutely bonkers soundtrack that even now is illegal. And if you really must have bananas pace, it's got that too. It will flow down a road if you're not being an absolute tool. And if you want to be gentle with it and just make brisk progress, it'll do that happily too. Once upon a time, I wouldn't have even given the second thought to an F-Type instead of a 911, but now it's actually the other way around. Granted, that's got as much to do with the fact that I think the 911 has lost something as much as the F-Type has gained something, but really, it's a marvellous thing. In case you were wondering, insurance for a 21-year-old isn't cheap. It did take some negotiation, but Ethan managed to get it down to about £2,500, so he's still talking over 200 quid a month on average. That's a lot, and I expect for many people it's going to be a bit too much. However, if you're considering either a 4-cylinder or V6 F-Type, I'd issue some caution. For me, a huge part of this car's charm is that amazing 5-litre supercharged Jaguar engine, which is definitely not a Ford lump. I've been told off about that before. It's built by Ford at the Bridgend facility in Wales for Jaguar, but it's entirely unrelated to the 5-litre Ford lump. So sorry about that, Jaguar people. I have got that wrong previously. The 4-cylinder Ingenium is actually a lovely engine, but it's just not right in an F-Type. And the V6 drinks nearly as much as this does, doesn't produce the power, and is relatively unreliable. As a feat of engineering, it's also a serious compromise, and I'm just not sure I could live with it. I know a lot of people really love it and rate it, but I'm not one of them. The more interesting question would be whether you want the 2-wheel drive or the all-wheel drive, and I haven't yet ever driven a 2-wheel drive V8 F-Type. I do believe they're rather leery. I wouldn't be surprised, because the old XK was. If you want something a bit like this, expect to pay anywhere between £40,000 and £50,000, which should sound like a lot of money until you realise that the Golf GTI I had recently was 42.5, and all of a sudden this begins to look like a bit of a bargain. You can certainly have fun in it. It's got a great badge, fabulous pedigree, and it's just different. I like different a lot. It's silly shouty, and I have no time for that exhaust, but beyond that, this is a great car. It can do just about everything, so long as you don't need masses of boot space or more than 2 seats. It'll even get nearly 30 to the gallon on a run. That's not bad. I recently had a Range Rover Velar plug-in hybrid, and that did about the same. Never quite sure whether this whole planet-saving business is actually going to do us, the consumer, that many favours. But anyway, there is a brief look at what is still a fabulous car, and a very good way to spend about 45 grand. Thanks, Ethan, for bringing it out. Thanks to you for watching. Please like, comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't already. Bye-bye.